Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first IRU-POLIS webinar. I've seen that all of you are joining in quite quickly, and I'm seeing a lot of familiar names. My name is Niklas Schmalholz. I'm working for POLIS, and previously I've worked for the IRU, and so I'm very glad that we are cooperating now together. So in case you have questions, please state them in the Q&A segment, and the webinar is being recorded. And in case you are missing something, or if you want to revisit certain parts, please check the POLIS YouTube channel where we will upload the content in the next few days. And also, in case you have further questions, you can always contact us, because we are also going to share our contact details later. Okay, why do we cooperate? It is actually pretty easy, because there are two groups of stakeholders are coming together. One is the IRU, the International Road Freight Transport Union, which is an organization, a global organization that takes care of road transport. And today we are specifically talking about freight. And so that's the industry and the OEMs that are building the trucks in our case. And for POLIS, we are Cities and Regions for Transport Innovation, the POLIS network, and we are taking care of urban mobility. And we represent the cities and regions in Europe, but also the mobility agencies. So why do we need to cooperate? What's the aim? In this first webinar, we of course have different ideas. So on the one hand, the road freight transport industry wants to have a free flow of goods. They would like to have planning security with regards to the decarbonization of fleets. But the industry also has specific expectations, whereas city governments, cities and regions, they want to promote urban mobility, and they of course would like to limit the access of trucks, and don't want to have these ginormous vehicles roaming around the streets. And therefore it is important that we talk to each other. So we need to check, okay, what are the policy plans, and how are we going to deal with the challenges of the future? That's why we're all here. So therefore we are organizing 3 webinar series. The first one is, of course, now today. The second one will be basically in exactly 1 month on the 12th of March, but 30 minutes longer. And the third one will be on the 16th of April. And the third, we are talking about zero-emission logistics in the peri-urban environment. And the third one will focus on energy infrastructure. Before we're going to start our bigger discussion with various stakeholders, we will start with Ben Kraaijenhagen, who is a consultant with more than 40 years of experience focusing on mobility in the transport industry. He's working on various European projects that you can see here, and he has also established a couple of EU platforms and works on long-haul freight in general. And I will give the floor to Ben. Welcome to the webinar.
Thank you very much, Niklas, and warm welcome also from my side. I'm very happy to join and to give you a short overview at a high level. I will touch 4 points: some background, what are the targets we are facing with, what is the complexity we are facing with, and the challenges to discuss in the coming sessions. So if you would switch to the next slide. Thank you, Niklas. Thank you. We go back 1 step and we look at certain analysis and reports which have been published. And I like the one from Alan McKinnon, who has done a lot of research and a lot of analysis. And to find out what is the importance of road freight transport if you look at it from a global carbon footprint. If we look at the transport share of the total energy, we talk about 23%. If we then look at the freight of the share, then it's about 42%. And if we then look at road share, we are even up to 65%, which is in total 6.4% of the total energy-related CO2 emissions. And you see now immediately why it is important that IRU and Polis do talk to each other, because if we look at the split urban and non-urban, then we are talking about 35% against 65%. And this brings us already to one big challenge: is how can you connect urban and non-urban, that you have a smooth operation between. And the second challenge is, if we look at the table in the right, we are at number 3. If you would count road freight as a country, then it is on 3rd place in million tons if we look to the year 2020. So here you see already 2 challenges. First of all, the high level of emissions we are causing. And secondly, how can you connect urban with non-urban? Next slide. Thank you. And also, Alan McKinnon did already a lot of analysis and work on what can you do, how can you decarbonize, and what are the 5 levers he found out. And those are already very difficult, because the first one, reduce the amount of freight. That already is depending on behavior of people. And that's already depending on how can we move freight around. Secondly is, how can we shift to low carbon transport modes? We talk a lot about intermodality, shift from road to rail, shift from road to water, etc. But this is also not always possible. We can optimize the utilization of our assets. And optimization, then you start already transport less, transport the same amount in less units, or look at energy efficiency improvements. And the last one is cut the carbon content. And if you look over the years, 2000 up to and including 2019, then we still see that the causes of changes in the EU trucking emissions, yes, we have some results, but it is not really driving in the right direction. So we have still a rising transport demand. We have still modal shift, which is offset by improving energy efficiency and increased use of biofuels. So we have here already another few challenges which we have to discuss today and in the coming sessions. Next slide. And another analysis which is coming out of one of my previous projects, Aeroflex, we did a deep dive in what is to expect in the near future and in the future up to 2040 to see how will the road freight transport evolve and how will it grow. And we made a baseline scenario 2010, and we see there a nice split in rail, road and water, and in addition the combined transport, railroad and waterways. If we then made the evaluation and the evolution perspective towards 2040, we see that transport is increasing still. The demand will grow because of we have the need to have more products, we have the need to more transport of goods. So if you counter this evolution, then you have to do more with less. That means we need to have more efficient logistics. We need to use all the boats. But even if rail and water would double their capacity, then still you need road as probably the most important way. So this is again a challenge why we need to look at road transport. We need to look at how can we become more efficient, looking at vehicle infrastructure, and how can we be more compatible with other modes. And then we have to dive into the topics of hub terminals, loading units, but also the hubs around cities. How can I connect urban and long distance in a better way? Next slide. If we look to the emission targets, which are recently published by the Council the 18th of January this year, then we see immense reductions, 45% by 2030, 65 by 2035, and 90 by 2040. And for buses, there is even a target set for new city buses, which are zero-emission tailpipe from 2030 onwards. That means that we have to do an enormous job, and we have to do it together, because one single activity will never make it possible to achieve these targets. So here again, talking about freight of transport of freight, talking about long haul, talking about the connection to urban cities, but also in the intermodal perspective, we need to look at these targets, and we need to look at what kind of measures can we derive so that we can meet the targets. What was positive for me, at least, is that the use of technology is free. So we can look at electrification, we can look at hydrogen fuel cells or hydrogen for internal combustion vehicles. So that means that together with the industry, we can look at what are the technologies we can use, which are affordable, which are reliable, so that we can meet the challenges with respect to freight transport in general. I come to that later. Luckily, also, some specific category of vehicles have exemptions so that we can de-stress in those categories and focus on the really important parts of freight transport. Now let's dive into what are the challenges in transport. Next slide. Freight transport is a very complex process. I think an open door for everybody, but we see that goods are transported all over the world, and they always have a mode change. From a factory or warehouse, you go to a certain hub or a nut way, it will be change modality, either rail, road, water, or air. And then at the end of that, we will have another terminal hub or node, and we have to transport again by truck to, let's say in this example, the surrounding of a city. And from there, we have different possibilities to distribute the goods into city areas, including last miles. And we have a lot of examples which are tested at the moment. But in all these flows, there are three things important. The time, when do I need to deliver the goods? The quantity and quality of the goods. How much do I need to deliver? And in what quality I need to deliver. And an example is fresh fruit or vegetables or flowers. And the third one is the cost of transport. Because before goods are transported, between the selling party and the buying party, there was a contract which is stated, I pay you so much, and that is always including transport costs. So if we look at the complexity and we look at what are the topics we can look at, then We can talk about digital infrastructure and services. How can we make things more efficient so then you do more with less? How can we use in a better way European modular system loading units, which are intermodal? So how can we support intermodality in a better way? How can we make the terminals and the logistics center more efficient and more open for multimodality, and also have an increase in efficiency at the processes? How can we connect the hubs from long haul into urban, into last mile? And this is not an easy task as well. Finally, we see still in Europe already, but worldwide is even more worse. But if we go down to a Europe perspective and we look at Europe as Europe, we look at the different countries, we look at the regions in the countries, we have a non-harmonized legal framework. We have too many variations in type approval and road permits, because in fact even either region or nationality can decide to change things to suit them. And the problems between intermodality railroad, talking to hub managers, talking to rail operators, talking to road operators, to say it in these words, we always are confronted with processes, protocols and certification processes which are not harmonized as well. So these 5 points I also would like to see in the coming sessions in parallel with in addition with the points I already touched. Next slide. Taking these points which we have addressed at the moment, I see that we can do a lot more through collaboration. The 6 boxes you see are all picking up the points which we have seen in the previous slides. High capacity transport not only means longer and heavier vehicles, but it also means a better utilization of the vehicles I have, to reduce the number of vehicles, to reduce the ton kilometers, and to use less space. We talked already about zero-emission tailpipe vehicles, looking at the targets we have to achieve, and aerodynamic is playing an important role there, because all these vehicles with this high technology, yes, it will electrify the vehicle and it will make them zero-emission tailpipe, but we have to look at energy use to ensure that we can drive from A to B in the time we have available. We can automate vehicles and we can automate processes, the vehicles on the road, but also the vehicles on terminals, at terminals, in hubs, and in city or urban environments. Because then you have again less space and less accident and a more efficiency. For that, you need a digital platform to make sure that the flow keeps on going. And the end result will then again less ton kilometer and less traffic. I touched already mode compatibility, so that we can use better, in a better way, the modes. And for that, you need mode compatible loading units. Last but not least, and here I see not much development yet in Europe. There are other continents where this is already developed in a much better way, is intelligent access. How can we use our roads? How can we use our infrastructure in a better way, that you give the right priority to the right cargo, to the right truck, to the right at the right time, and ensure that they are on the right road. And by having an intelligent access, you can avoid that at uptime the wrong vehicles are in a city environment. So all these 6 boxes I see as an opportunity we can use to collaborate, and then joining long distance freight transport with urban freight transport. Next slide. The challenges. We talk too much about the truck itself, but it is not about trucks. If we look in what is about these vehicles, then we see that we have to look at the flow of energy. Where is the energy coming from, and how I am going to use the energy to move trucks? Is it electric or is it hydrogen? How can I build this infrastructure, not only in the city, but also outside the city? How can I connect renewable energy there? Then the trucks itself, I think, clear. I've talked already about modular systems, about intermodality, but if we look at the flow of the goods, then we look at specifically this digital platform, that we can optimize the use of the roads, that we can optimize the process of the logistics itself, that we can use the driver in a better way, that he gets more attention to do his job in a proper way. And we have to look at the warehousing of the goods, so that also here we have a better utilization. We did a vast survey amongst operators in long haul, in city environment, and we have all the answers made available in a vast report, which is available on our website, the ZEFES project website, where you can learn about how these people view and see the challenges and what they are requiring. This is about the value chain itself, the CPOs and the hydrogen operators, the OEMs itself, but also the shippers and the transport operators, the drivers, but also what is about the planning of the whole logistics and the hub operators. So here you can really have an in-depth information package to use for the upcoming sessions. So highly recommended. Next slide. I think I come to an end for my short keynote. It was really meant to have a high-level picture. The 3 sessions, I think, are a very nice opportunity to find each other, to derive or determine action points. Where can we collaborate? What can we tackle? Where do we see the importances of what are our challenges? Today, we are looking at the big picture, as I tried to explain with this nice graph. The second one is then looking at how can we go from long haul to urban. And the third session is the infrastructure. And by that, I believe we are tackling this whole simplified supply chain with all the elements in it. And yeah, I would like to thank you for the attention and give the word back to Niklas.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ben. This was very informative. I will give the floor now to Holger, who will manage the roundtable discussion with all our experts. And also for that segment, in case you have questions, please state them in the Q&A segment of the webinar. And in case we still have time at the end or during the roundtable discussion, we can come back to you. Thank you very much, Ben.
Thank you very much, Ben.
I will answer the question in the chat box, and then you can go on.
Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you very much, Niklas. Let me get right into the roundtable, because we have assembled 4 panelists here who we believe can offer distinct but complementary perspectives on the decarbonization of road transport based on their own experiences and based on experiences of their constituencies in their respective fields. So we have 2 membership-based trade associations with IRU and POLIS. And we also have representatives from the industry or private sector and then the local government and the public sector. And I will introduce them in alphabetical order, beginning with Monsieur Emmanuel Arnaud, who is the Senior Vice President of Operations and in charge of sustainability at the third-party logistics company XPO Logistics Europe. Our second panelist is IRU's own Marc Billier. Marc has been leading IRU's goods transport and logistics advocacy work at the EU level since 2006, where he has worked towards EU legislative and non-legislative initiatives. Marc also coordinates IRU's environmental work within the European Union. Our third speaker, Bart Dumoulin, works for the transport team of the Flemish environmental NGO Bond Better Leefmilieu, mainly on sustainable urban logistics and as a coordinator of a peer-to-peer learning network with the main Flemish cities. He also coordinates the Flemish Green Deal on sustainable urban logistics, in which companies and cities cooperate and share knowledge to make urban logistics more sustainable. Last but not least, we have Raffaele Vergnani from POLIS. He is the coordinator of the Urban Freight Working Group at POLIS and oversees thematically related projects and activities in the urban freight cluster. His current portfolio includes the Move 21 and DISCO projects, and he has co-written and contributed to more than 10 research studies commissioned by the European Commission and the European Parliament. He's also taken part in international working groups focused on transport and tourism, such as the Alpine Convention. Let me dive right into the questions. And I want to start with the why of decarbonization, because generally speaking, that is not a particularly contentious issue, certainly less contentious than the whether and how, as Ben's presentation showed very nicely. But I would like to hear from all of our speakers and panelists whether they could very briefly explain from their perspectives why we really need to pursue decarbonization. What is at stake here, in other words? Monsieur, I know you are first, so please feel free to go ahead.
Thanks, Holger, and thank you very much for the invitation to IRU and POLIS. Probably the reason why you invited XPO to be part of the roundtable is because the essence of the value proposition of our company is to offer a logistics solution from long haul to last mile. So probably it's topical for the discussion of today: global forwarding, RNC, full truck, part truckloads, warehousing services as the node of multimodality, and then pallet distribution and even last mile delivery. Key figures about our company: about 14,000 members and employees, 1 million square meters. We have about 20,000 vehicles in our fleet, and probably another 8,000 to 10,000 with our partner subcontractors. And with that, we deliver probably 4 full truckloads every minute, 200 drops of last mile every hour, and 60,000 pallets every day. And altogether, we generate about 3 billion revenue. Now, to come to your point, our company is pioneering in innovative solution towards sustainable supply chain and decarbonization for a while already. And we have implemented and are continuing to implement alternative transport solution and powered by alternative energies as well. We are committed to decarbonization and carbon neutrality by 2050. And to answer specifically your question, we believe that being an early adopter for our company of decarbonization is a key differentiator already today in the business world. We are teaming up, partnering with companies like us who believe that we need to start acting now. And these companies who have taken commitment, basically, we are delivering with them long-lasting positive impact. So that's probably my first take here, Holger.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Bart? I'm sorry, we're going alphabetically. Marc.
Thank you very much, Holger, and good afternoon, everybody. Now, when we look at the road freight transport sector, we are a service industry. We serve the economy and we serve the entire society. So as an industry, as a service industry, we have a responsibility to continuously try to reduce our environmental footprint. And for decades, we have done this already in terms of pollutant emissions, and the Euro norms have helped us a lot in that. And now we also have to pick up the gauntlet in decarbonization. Now, as Ben already mentioned it, as road freight transport industry, we cannot do this all by ourselves. We are looking indeed at partnerships with authorities, with industry providers, and with service providers to our industry. And there I would like to dig up an old 3I IRU strategy, which is more than ever relevant today. To decarbonize, ladies and gentlemen, we need first innovation. We need operational innovation, vehicle innovation, fuel innovation, to make sure that the right tools are available. And we are a multifaceted industry, so we need multiple tools, not just one silver bullet. Now, we need incentives to make sure that the innovation reaches the market. And then thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, we need infrastructure. Now, we need good road infrastructure, but we also need good digital infrastructure. We need parking areas. We need fueling infrastructure. Now, we have to be realistic about the targets set, and these targets are very ambitious. And we have to be ambitious, but we have to make sure that our ambitions remain feasible and also affordable, and that the entire industry can actually join the effort and follow, because our industry consists in Europe 85% of small and medium-sized enterprises. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Bart, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for handling this topic. Because a couple of years ago within our organization, we were thinking of what field is still lacking in our work, where we were thinking about air pollution in cities. And then we realized that, at least in Flanders, city logistics was underestimated when it comes to the impact, and that's where we started to work on this. And in the first analysis we made, we realized that where cities were already working on passenger traffic, the logistics part was really lacking. And so we started a process to work together with cities, together with companies, in order to put this topic on the agenda. Because of course the impact of the city logistics is huge. It's multiple. It's about infrastructure. It's about congestion. It's about noise nuisance. It's about road safety, and it's about urban space. But of course also about air quality. And if we look at city logistics, we see that when it comes to the part of kilometers is about 10 to 20%. But it is causing 25%, or responsible for 25% of the CO2 emissions in the city, and even 30 to 50% for nitrogen and particulate matter. So the impact is huge and disproportionate when it comes to kilometers on the one hand and pollution on the other hand. So we need to find solutions for this. This webinar is about decarbonization, of course, but I think decarbonization is only the final part of it. And I think we first should look, and that's also a little bit the point I understood from Ben, we should first look at how can we reduce the number of trips, how can we avoid trips by working more efficient and more collaboration between different actors. The second part would be to shift to other modes that are more environmental friendly. For instance, cargo bikes might be a very good alternative, which is still underused. And the third part will only be to when we still need vans or trucks to make them zero emission. So I think this is very important to state that it's a pyramid, and we first have to look at the first steps, and in the end only look at the decarbonization. But that's a very important one, and luckily technology and legislation are helping us on this one. So this would be my answer for this first question.
Thank you very much, Bart. And Raffaele, what is your take on the why for decarbonization?
Thank you very much, Holger, and thank you also to the speakers and also Ben for the great keynote introduction. So from our standpoint, so from the standpoint of cities or regions, so many of the elements have already been said. I will start from a slide that was shared by Ben at the beginning, so from the data from Professor Alan McKinnon. So urban 35% of CO2 emissions so from road freight are also generated in an urban environment. So this is also to underline how cities, it also would extend also to regions, are also the center and also the focus on this problem and where this issue can be also tackled. Regarding decarbonization, of course, cities are, I back also what Bart just said. So cities are more and more aware of the issue, or are tackling freight issues and road freight. So they are aware that also part of the pollution and congestion issues that also are struggling many of cities also are regarding also freight, and also having to try to better understand how freight works also in the urban and peri-urban environment. Also to collaborate with the private sector, with the industry, is a necessary step to also act in this sense and contribute to increase to improve the local transport in cities, and also reduce congestion in particular, and also mitigate the effect of pollution, so improve air qualities and the pollutants that we also know have several effects on citizens' life. So this is why also we at Polis, we are very much committed to make sure that also our cities within our network and also beyond, so start to tackle freight from an urban perspective, but also beyond, because we are all aware now that supply chains and logistics are not concentrated on cities. So we have the last mile, of course, but the long haul, as was explained in the keynote, so it's much wider and more complicated than that. So cities need to be aware, need to act, and of course need to also to have a dialogue with the industry, as also Mark explained also in his intervention. So we need to also have together in this, and that's why we are also today also to raise awareness and start this discussion. And also another point that I would like to add, so the cities are more and more acting on this, and also as Polis we're committed to make sure that cities start this path, so that can take several steps. So for example, we try to facilitate the work through the implementation of pilots through European funded projects, but also to start dialogues or cooperation between the private sector at local level. That's, for example, the example that also Bart and the Flanders regions have been doing. So this is our view in general about also how cities can contribute to decarbonization.
Thank you very much to all of our panelists here. I'm going to move into question 2, which is in some ways related to the first one. Now that we've identified a shared responsibility to drive decarbonization forward, could you address perhaps how far you think we have come in our efforts to actually decarbonize? So this is an opportunity to kind of take stock of the present and list some of the things you have done individually in your respective sectors, and from there we will then move into the opportunities and obstacles that remain here. So once again, Monsieur Arnaud, please.
Thank you. Well, as XPO Logistics, we are already committed to decarbonization for more than 10 years, and we have business cases which are already in place. I mean, I'm sitting today in Paris, and if you would look at the window at about midday, you would see a full barge of containers coming from the outside of the Paris city, the outskirts. And to avoid having 25 to 30 trucks commuting into the city, we are delivering into the inner city, nearby the Eiffel Tower, every day these 30 containers, so that we only have few miles to deliver retail shop within the city center. So this is a live business case, how to convert and to decrease the carbon emission on the urban deliveries. Now, on a bigger scale than this pure business case, we have committed to a 25% reduction of our emissions in Europe until 2030. And we want to go faster, definitely. Our belief is that there is no magic wand that, as it was said by Ben, I think we need, and also reflected by Mark, we need multiple factors. Optimization, it's an obvious one, and this is what a standard 3PL provider like XPO would do, driver training to reduce consumption, management and reduction of the empty kilometers, more rational transport plan, double-deck trailers, long vehicles, just like we have in Spain with duo trailers. This is mathematically already changing the game. But the next step is to try the switch to multimodal. I see that there are questions on the chat about that. We have already adopted multimodal and multimodal trailers, basically P400 trailers, which are able to travel unaccompanied on boats, to travel on trains, and also to be pulled by tractor units. And basically today we are able to offer a service from Tangiers into Birmingham, where the truck is basically on the road less than 400 kilometers. All the rest is done by alternative solution with reduced emission. And then the third pillar is that we bet on multi-energy mix. We don't believe that there is one size fits all. Last year, we have consumed 5 million liters of HVO as an alternative to diesel on the diesel engine vehicles. We have invested in hundreds of gas vehicles, biogas vehicle. I also see that there is a question. This is another use case, and we have inserted into our fleet already close to 100 electrical rigid vehicles, 16 to 19 tons. Again, on these use cases, whenever the technology is meeting the operational requirements, we are in the lead. And all this has already enabled us to achieve over 11% reduction of emission between 2019 and 2022. And when I say we want to be minus 25 in 2030, and we want to be faster, we are, I think, on top of the game.
Thank you very much. Mark, the floor is yours.
Well, the question we have to ask ourselves is, how difficult is it to reach the summit of the Mount Everest? And how many base camps do you have to pass before you can actually reach the summit? And potentially we're all looking a little bit too much immediately at the summit and try to reach it as fast as possible. And we are neglecting too much what can be gained by actually visiting the different base camps. So when I look at it from a general perspective, from a legislative perspective, I think we still have a long way to go. When I actually look at what the IRU member associations and the transport companies have already done over the last decade or more, that's quite significant. But it is not always recognized as it should be. There have been investments in new vehicles. There have been investments in new logistical processes. There have been investments in operational processes. There have been attempts and initiatives to actually reduce emissions and fuel consumptions. I know that quite a number of companies have been actively involved in carbon footprinting exercises with the aim to actually reduce their carbon footprint. But these are low-hanging fruits, which are not necessarily very recognized. Now, indeed, we have very little time to achieve very ambitious targets. And here, when we want to go zero emission, we have a technology that is still under development. Now, battery electric vehicles, and when I look back at Ben's graph, when you look at the 35% of CO2 emissions on urban, we see there that we have most technological options in terms of vehicles already. But in the 65%, we still have a long road to go. So we have to develop technology, and we have to tackle the bottlenecks that are already existing, especially when people want to order vehicles and the very long lead times. But we have to look wider. We have to look at the fuels. We have to consider more how with the current ICE technology, we can already start decarbonizing more than we have done before. We also have to look at the operations. Okay, now, in terms of cooperation, yeah, that is essential. Now, looking, for example, at cooperation with the municipalities, we see quite often that unilateral decisions are being taken on targets that have to be met by the logistics industry. Now, the logistics industry, and especially the specialists in urban logistics, they are keen and creative to actually adapt, but they have to be able to adapt, and they have to be able to actually meet the deadlines and the targets set. So the dialogue between the actual service providers and the authorities is unbelievably important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Bart, what is your take on this question?
Well, as you told in the introduction, Holger, we have been coordinating the Flemish Green Deal on sustainable city logistics, where we have some 50 companies and a few cities participating that take specific actions that contribute to zero-emission city logistics. Through a process, we made an overview of the obstacles that they have been facing in these actions. We have been looking for solutions, and we transferred or translated these solutions into policy recommendations. And actually, at this moment in Flanders, we are involved in a stakeholder dialogue where we want to have a legal framework on emission-free city logistics. And there are some goals that are being discussed now with the sector federations and all stakeholders involved, in fact. So it's quite a democratic process. And actually, we're discussing zero-emission vehicles, the target for smaller freight vehicles, let's say vans, could be new sales zero emission from 2027 onwards, and all vans zero emission from 2033 onwards. The bigger freight vehicles, the trucks, heavy duty vehicles, new sales from 2029 onwards, and all vehicles from 2035. So this is a discussion that we are doing now with all stakeholders involved to find a good legal framework at the Flemish level. So this will be very helpful because we also get the question from the sector that there should be, on the one hand, uniformity, but also that it should be a clear goal. So that everybody knows which kind of decisions they should take about their investments. Now, if I took a small look at what's happening in the cities. In the cities, a lot of Flemish cities, we have these medieval towns. And so they are not really appropriate for these large and big vehicles. So a lot of them have restrictions when it comes to the length of the vehicle. So it's limited to 10 meters. And some of them have limitations on the tonnage as well, on the weight, so let's say. But there are still a lot of exceptions on that. And I feel in discussions with cities that they want to look at to reduce these exceptions, because it's still too easy for large vehicles, for large trucks to enter the city. So cities are thinking to discuss this topic and to make regulations stronger on that one. I also have the feeling that there is more policy attention on these heavy-duty vehicles. So I mentioned already the passenger cars on the one hand. Now it has been starting about city logistics, but now they're also really focusing on heavy-duty vehicles. What should they do with these vehicles in the cities? What are the possibilities of night deliveries, for instance, which gives good opportunities for electric vehicles because they can be silent, of course. They are thinking about privilege policies for light electric vehicles, which might also be a good alternative in this model shift. But of course, from the Flemish level, there will be the obligation, more or less, to have zero emission zones for freight in the city at a certain moment, and this will be influencing this process as well. And last but not least, cities are also thinking about the possibility to use hubs on the border of the city where the big vehicles can deliver their goods, and you have the change to smaller zero-emission vehicles. So cities, when they need to develop a sustainable urban logistic plan by 2027, this gives them the opportunity. We have 5 cities in Flanders that need to develop such an urban logistics plan. That gives them the opportunity to integrate this idea of hubs and zero-emission vehicles. So a lot of that is going on in Flanders.
Thank you very much, Bart. Raffaele, your position on this question before we move to the final round.
Thank you, Holger. Actually, many things I would like to say have been mentioned by Bart from this great example of Flanders, that this approach has been done on urban freight by Flemish cities, and also that is shared also by other police members who started a similar path in urban freight. So again, here for road freight, there are still, I would have to say, quite a lot has been happening in the last few years. So we started for more consultation awareness from cities, which is also concretized in some areas with some paths who started with discussions and cooperation with the local actors, but also with the starting of specific pilots and examples. So the range of solution and approach that has been tackled by some cities in particular is wide range, and some have been just mentioned by Bart, ranging from urban consolidation centers or parcel lockers or other kind of solution that allow for let's say to tackle the fragmentation of urban freight flows incoming to the cities, and also make sure that also the last mile are less and less taken with the motorized transport means, and also through, I was mentioning also before, the experience of European funded projects. We have also cities with their already tackling this and experimenting pilots together with the industry sector, with logistic providers, which also concretize in, for example, in some digitalization, digital twins application, who also showed very interesting results, and that we also came out with some policy recommendations through our the LEAD project, in which also all these living labs in this specific Horizon project showed reduction in CO2 emission and also for trip generation. So very promising results from the last mile perspective. Then coming also to some of the points mentioned by Mark earlier, I very much agree also with the approach, what he said, so that it's important that cities and the industry and logistics operator have more and more discussion also to regarding this topic, also because to have a clear understanding, so to establish a continuous dialogue about also what are the measures and the policy framework that cities and regions need also to apply to be in order to meet the decarbonization targets set by the Commission at the European level. So also to make sure that also this path is shared between cities and freight, and this is why also we are trying to also promote this dialogue with many of the stakeholders involved at European level. So also to make sure that when there are deadlines to meet or targets to meet, this is also shared with the industry, and they are not just imposed, and also all the whole sector can cooperate together and find the best solution that also translates into some of the application that, for example, has been mentioned for Flanders, but also other cities are applying in this sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Raffaele. In the interest of time, I will have to consolidate the last couple of questions that we plan to ask in this round. It's very obvious that we have a continued need for dialogue. In fact, I has been kind of the main emerging for this round. So let me just ask you, the panelists, very briefly, to perhaps identify either a particular obstacle or a particular opportunity that they see in their respective sectors to move forward with decarbonization. And again, I'm very happy to see that there's a lively exchange in the Q&A. So we will continue this work. We're not at the beginning of decarbonization, but we're certainly at the beginning of this webinar series, and we will have further opportunities to address certain topics. So again, thank you to the panelists, and please, we start with Monsieur Arnaud on that very last, very brief question, and I apologize for the for cutting this a little bit short.
Thanks, Holger. No, I think this is a fascinating discussion that we are having, and we have different perspectives around the call, so it's really appreciated. I think to build on what has been commented by the people around the panel, I think we should be very positive about decarbonization, And we are, I mean, as XPO, we believe that the future that we are talking about is now already. From our side, we adopt technology as soon as it's made available. So it's not a matter of looking at what's happening and then taking it when we think it's mature. It's about implementing, deploying, testing, and validating and approving. From our side, we have launched what we call the LESS program with the support of our customers. LESS standing for Low Emission Sustainable Solutions. And this is a program where we enable any new technology to be made available to our portfolio of customers as soon as it is there. When it comes to achievement, we will be delivered this year tens of last mile electric vehicles to substitute old diesel fleet in the UK and in France. And we will even become 1% electrical in the last mile deliveries in Ireland, for instance, in 2024. The breaking news from our side is that we've not waited. We have placed an order of over 165 EV trucks, including over 100 of heavy-duty tractor. There was one question about that topic. Even though there is a limited autonomy, around 250, 300 kilometers, we are betting on this technology, and we will onboard as soon as they are made available. The first one has been received last week, tractor units to deliver close to the cities. And this is part of what we want to test and implement. For sure, we need to partner with our clients, and this is reshaping the commercial relationship. It's important that there is an allocation of resources from the customer side as well as from the logistics service providers. It's about CapEx, for sure. In time of high interest rate, betting on more expensive technology, more expensive truck is a challenge, but that's what we do. We bet on it. It's about availability of people because we need to have fast return on experience and readapt quickly. And it's about also building the infrastructure. And this is probably the challenge where we need all the people on the phone and all the people on the call to support, because at the end of the day, if we have a nice electrical vehicle, but we have very long charging time, this is an issue. So yeah, that's probably my conclusion. Maybe one last word, if I can, about the subsidies that are provided by the authorities, whoever they are. This is extremely helpful for companies like us, but we should think about decarbonization as a positive matter. And when we hear talking about environmental taxes coming soon, ETS regulation is already there, we should think of, let's say, a positive tax, which is not feeding the governments, but rather more feeding the investment into alternative trucking, be it on long haul or last mile. Thank you.
Thank you. We will talk about infrastructure in a third webinar. And that brings me to Mark and your final thoughts.
Yes. Now, when you look at the opportunities, undoubtedly, there are several opportunities already available in different subsectors of our industry, but they are very different. And a lot depends on the circumstances. Now, what we need to do is we need to raise more awareness with our transport operators on what they actually have available to actually contribute to the decarbonization drive. Now, when it comes to barriers, we first of all have to move away from only looking at the vehicle and have to look at wider activity and see how we can do more to actually reduce the carbon footprint there, or the environmental footprint. And we also have to look at the compatibility of the policies, not only in the European Union, but also within the member states, because we all have to reduce environmental footprint. So we have to innovate. But we see that also people want to do modal shift, and they want to shift between modes by blocking innovation in certain other modes. Now, this is counterproductive to us, to everybody, actually meeting the decarbonisation targets and serving society in a better and more sustainable way.
Thank you. Again, I apologize for having to keep this brief. So Bart and Raffaele.
Yes. Well, my key takeaways on this one would be, on the one hand, a prerequisite, I think, is that although there is a growing awareness, we still need to work on this one. And I'm very happy that we have this kind of webinars to let this awareness grow, on the one hand for the cities and regions, and on the other hand in the industry, because there's still a lot of work needs to be done about the need to make this transition to emission-free logistics. So let's work on that one. On the other hand, I think there has been a good process made on the costs, and when it comes to the total cost of ownership, which is not yet mentioned in this discussion. It's a very important one, of course, and recent studies that have been developed by the University of Brussels have shown that the momentum from the total cost of ownership for electric vehicles is already very close. So 2025, 2026 when it comes to vans, and 2029 for heavy duty vehicles. So this might be a very good instrument as well to look at, and very important for different players to look at this total cost of ownership and make the studies that are available, to make them worthwhile to make this transition. This would be my two main points here.
Thank you. Raffaele?
Thank you, Holger. I will be short. So also just to come back to summarize also main of the key takeaways. So I would say two things that I should merge in the next few years and also decades. I would say it's also more and more I see the trend that logistics need to be more efficient. So we have to make sure that also volumes and flows will be more efficient as possible, also to avoid unnecessary trips, or also facilitate also this process with the freight logistics sector, and also encourage cities and regions to have freight more and more incorporated into their planning processes. So we already see this in several cities, especially from Central and Northern Europe, with sustainable urban logistic plans active, and also more and more planning into the regional and national levels. We have example from the Netherlands, for example. So we would like to see also this process also more and more embedded into the local planning, and also that's why we are also have this this conversation also with the other relevant actors at European level, also to provide a recommendation in this sense to the European Commission. And also that's why we need also this kind of event and this collaboration with the freight sector, because also this is the kind of dialogue we need, and also because in the end, so freight and industry, the flows goes to the cities and to the region, and also we need to understand also how they work, and that's why the industry sector is there.
Thank you, Raffaele. Thank you to all the panelists, and dialogue being the key word here. I will hand it over to Niklas for some concluding remarks, and especially on how we continue this dialogue. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, it was absolutely fantastic. There were so many topics that we could have talked about for much longer. Just to be very brief before you leave all this virtual room, the next eTruck midterm conference, which I have already posted in the chat, will take place on the 21st of February, basically an entire day, and it will be in Brussels, but also online. You can use the QR code to register. What is this all about? Let me just briefly tell you this. Next eTruck is a European project as part of the IVETO cluster. Maybe you've heard about this already. Zephyrs, the project that was already presented briefly by Ben, is also part of this. We will talk about battery electric HDVs, which will operate in the peri-urban area. And there are 3 real-world pilots, which are Barcelona, Istanbul, and the UK. And this project will basically test medium-sized vehicles that are operating on a daily basis for more than 6 months in urban and peri-urban areas. And even though the pilots have not taken place, we will elaborate on what are the opportunities for urban freight and how to decarbonize this, and what kind of innovative solutions are there related to battery management, enhanced drivetrains, digital twinning, thermal management solutions, and all of this, but also the topic of TCO, total cost of ownership, and how to reduce this to make all of this more accessible. This will be discussed. And then, of course, how do we go further? So in the discussion that we had, we said, yeah, okay, 1 hour should be plenty and sufficient. So we are very glad that we decided to have 90 minutes for the next 2 webinars, which will take place on the 12th of March and the 16th of April. You can use the QR codes to register, or either go on polisnetwork.eu, and there you can find all the information under events. The second one will present next eTruck. In case you cannot manage to attend our midterm conference, you will get some snackable content on that day. But also we will talk about hydrogen, and their H2Hol and H2 Accelerate will be presented by our friends from IRU, but also from other stakeholders. And then the last one, we will talk about the future of energy infrastructure. I've seen questions in the chat. There we go a little bit broader and look at, okay, what needs to happen on the 10T corridor, on the long haul, but also where does the future lie? Is it hybrid trucks? Is it, hybrid in the sense of electric and hydrogen, or is it purely electric or purely hydrogen? So there are so many topics that we would like to discuss with you, and therefore please use the chance to register now, and we will see you in 1 month's time, as I said, on the 12th of March. So thank you very much to everyone who joined online. I've seen that we had more than 110 participants, including us panelists. Thank you very much to all the experts, the speakers that have shared the insights with you today. And then I wish you a good day, and let's cooperate together. And we hope to see you again very soon.